This is my least favorite part.
This one?
And then I have to introduce.
You should turn it into like a song and dance routine.
And I go, I don't know what to say now.
You could have a teleprompter.
I should make myself a little note.
Just like, I had my teleprompter here. And if anyone could figure out what I wrote, that's pretty good.
I'm trying to go on the slides. That's what we were waiting for. I didn't realize you weren't going to have a visual.
I ran out of time, and I also wasn't sure what I was...
Good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you to our R.O.C.K CoreLife lesson. Thank you for coming. Tonight we have kind of a double duo, but it's a good team. Razi Lissy is here to do her part in the support group part, and then we have Lambert from Whole Health Nutrition Center who will give you more information on everything. So enjoy. Thank you.
Oh, you had more time.
Nope, that's it. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm Razi Lissy. I started the local chapter, the support group for celiac here. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about why we started that, and I'll just touch on a few things and I'll hand it over to Erin. We moved here a little less than 5 years ago, and I have 3 children, a mother of 3, and my oldest is Ami, and she's my daughter with celiac, and she's here with me today. That's where our lifelong journey began. Of course, when the doctor called me, the pediatrician called me with her blood results when she was a little under 3 years old, she said, I have to tell you the news, your daughter has celiac disease. And to be completely honest with you, I didn't know anything about it, and I don't even know if I've heard the word before, and I said, can you tell me a little bit more about that? What do I need to know? And she goes, you know what, I don't know that much about it. Why don't you do a Google search? And that's what I did, and ever since that's what I've been doing, and I'm just collecting my own information and educating myself and doing the best I can to create a safe environment for my daughter and to learn about this as a family. So why R.O.C.K? R.O.C.K is our local celiac support group. I'll leave some of these flyers if anyone wants them, and you should join the Facebook group. It's so that was really the point of it, was to kind of find a community and find a place to vent and talk and have activities and have community events and learn more all about this gluten-free life that we have to live, or whoever has the celiac or the gluten intolerance. It's not a choice. That's what you have to do. So this is a place where, my daughter was feeling alone. She doesn't have any classmates or friends in any other social circles that are the same as her. And that feeling of aloneness got me to come to this place of, we do need a community, we do need a support group. And in searching for one, within, a few hundred miles of where we live, of Vestal, there actually wasn't any. I made a million phone calls and sent emails and looked into all the different, I called all the leaders of the different support groups, and there was nothing. Everything either closed or moved or was no longer. And that kind of sparked we need this. That would be good to get people together, to be able to do this together. So I did start a local R.O.C.K chapter. I'm not the founder of R.O.C.K. It's Dana Korn is the founder of R.O.C.K. She wrote this book. This is a book that I'm in the middle of reading. It's called Wheat-Free, Worry-Free: The Art of Happy, Healthy, Gluten-Free Living. It's just a ton of information here, and she's the founder of R.O.C.K. So I am licensed to use the logo and content for our local R.O.C.K chapter. But this is the first event that we're doing, and I'm so happy you're all here to join and to learn about this. Just want to touch on a couple of the challenges, some key challenges that we see, and I'm sure anyone who is, knows anybody or chooses or has to live a gluten-free life is aware of and can relate to these. So some of the challenges, and I'll talk about the upside of it, and there is a little bit of an upside, and a tiny bit about some resources. Some of the main challenges are going out to eat, obviously, and when you're younger, it's the parties and the social circle stuff, Girl Scout meetings or any social gathering, even family gatherings and birthday parties. Those are the big, hard moments. You feel separate, you feel alone. Hi, welcome. So that would definitely be my top challenge, and we're so grateful, obviously, to be here at Core, where we do have options. How nice is that, to be able to say, yes, you're safe here, you can eat here, you guys can all eat here. So society, the lack of understanding. A lot of times, even, if family has a birthday party at school, one of the moms will bring in cupcakes and say, oh, I baked this, these are gluten-free. But then we're in kind of a bit of a situation where, yes, I'm so grateful to you, thank you so much for making these, but I don't know if it's safe enough for us. And that's, then we're in a bit of a situation where we don't want to offend anyone, but really safety comes first. And I don't know what your kitchen looks like, or if cross-contamination, or are you aware of ingredients? Are you aware that baking soda and baking powder need to actually be labeled gluten-free? Not all oats are gluten-free. So there are so many details that a lot of people aren't aware of. We were invited to dinner a while ago, and someone made something and said, this one is gluten-free. She can have the string beans. And after, cautiously asking some questions, it turns out there's soy sauce in there. So it's just things that people don't think about, and those are challenges because you don't want to stand out. You certainly don't want to offend anyone in the family or friends, and that's something that's hard, and you kind of have to, make your stand and advocate for yourself, first of all, and just be okay with that. One of the other challenges is, for beginners at least, is the reading the labels, going food shopping, knowing what is okay and what isn't okay. And I'll talk about that a little bit when we get to resources. And again, I'm doing a very, very short introduction. I don't want to steal your time. One of the latest discoveries I just had, which someone recommended on another celiac support group, was an app called IPIIT. It's an app that you download on your phone, and it basically, you scan barcodes after you set your preferences. So it either tells you okay for you or not for you. And that came in handy. For example, there was one tomato sauce or marinara that we especially like in our family. It's called Rayo's. We love it. We use it for everything. And they took off their gluten-free label recently. I only happened to notice it. I am a very detailed shopper, and I noticed that they took it off. So this app helped me. I'm not sure. Sometimes there's manufacturer bureaucracy or whatever the reasons might have been, but I used the app and scanned the barcode. Again, it's called IPIIT. Scanned the barcode, and it says okay for you. And that was a yes moment, oh, thank God. So that was so helpful. There are a million apps out there though, as well. So going shopping, all that. The other huge challenge is the mistakes. I pat myself on the shoulder all the time and say to myself, I'm doing an amazing job. My job is to keep my children safe and my daughters safe, and to educate the family and to live this gluten-free life that we have to live. And I do an amazing job. There are mistakes. They do happen. Not everything, unfortunately, is in our control. And those are very hard moments. And I could, of course, list, the 4 or 5 times that we had mistakes. And they're awful. Some people have terrible reactions. Some people don't. Whether it matters or not, but it does, inflame the intestines. And I don't want to get into the medical side of it, but either way, it's a terrible thing. And if you need to live a gluten-free life, you do need to be strict about it, and no mistakes are okay. So the mistakes are something that's a huge challenge and very hard to deal with emotionally. Getting on to the upside, there is an upside. It's obviously not a positive thing. Nobody wants to have a disease. But as I tell my children at the dinner table, everybody has something special. Everybody's special, and it's okay. And this has brought us so much resilience. It's taught us resilience. It's taught us to be so educated. It's taught us to be so, to advocate for ourselves. It's taught us as a family to know what we need, to know how to go about it. Of course, because there aren't so many options of eating out, we eat at home, so there's a lot more home cooking, and it's more health oriented. We get to choose what we're doing when we're doing the cooking at home, rather than, there's really never the option of let's just grab a bite on our way, let's just go for a pizza or any fast food. That doesn't work for us, and in a way that's a positive, if you're able to see it that way. Connecting with others who are the same as you, that is a positive. It's a nice thing. And it is a life journey as a family. Again, when she was 3, I didn't know what the word celiac was. I didn't know much about it. And now I know a lot, and I'm always learning and gathering so much information and joining all the discussion groups and just getting everything I can out of this so we make the best out of it. And just spreading the awareness. As far as resources, so I did show you the book by Dana Korn. That's one book for grown-ups. There's another one that an actress wrote. Her name is Jennifer Esposito. I read that one. It was a little intense, for my taste, but it does give you a ton of information. And she mainly talks about the diagnosis process, which took her a very, very long time as an adult. She only discovered it as an adult, and there was a lot of trial and error and terrible things happening in her personal life. But she also talks a lot about symptoms and how the symptoms vary drastically from person to person, and how some people will tend to pin any medical issue onto the celiac label. And some people will be, it's the gluten-free diet. If I stick with it, it's okay. If I don't, I'm also okay. It kind of depends how you go. Come on in.
Really sorry.
That's okay. Come on in. This is a little booklet, The Ultimate Guide to Gluten-Free Living, that I got from the Celiac Disease Center at Columbia University. Also just a lot of lists of grocery shopping and restaurants, and just a lot of helpful hints. If anyone wants to look through this, that would be fine. There are lots of children's books out there too. If your children are younger, or if anyone, or if you want to read it, on this level to kind of get the basics, it's kind of refreshing and nice. This one's totally adorable. They're a little dated. Some of them are from, 2000s, beginning of 2000s. The Gluten-Free Kid, a Celiac Disease Survival Guide, cartoons, and it's adorable. We like this one a lot. And another one was, this is also, for more toddler age, but it just breaks it down for you and describes it on a very basic level. Mommy, what is celiac disease? So I'm finishing up here. I mentioned that app. Of course, there are websites, tons and tons of websites. There's one website called healthline.com. It lists the best gluten-free living apps. IPIIT isn't on that one, so they vary. Beyond Celiac, celiac.com, tons of websites that offer tons of information when you're looking for it. Do grab a flyer on your way out if you want to, and definitely join the Facebook group. It's a celiac support Facebook group, and we'll advertise whatever events we do at other restaurants or other places in the future. And I'm happy you're here, and best of luck to you. I will just mention, of course, the food here is gluten-free and safe, just except for the bread, just in case. All right, good luck, Erin, and enjoy.
Wow, that was a lot of great information.
So we say a lot of talking.
I got a lot of notes from you. I think you might want that.
Okay.
Good. All right. Can everyone hear me all right? All right, perfect. So my name is Aaron Lambert. I'm the owner of the Whole Health Nutrition Center, and that was Razi. I want to make sure I pronounce it correctly. Razi was very nice, and Dina was very nice to contact me to see how I could help with this type of talk in terms of helping to inform everyone as to how to identify celiacs, how to handle celiacs, and how to go out and eat, and what you can do in terms of nutrition when you actually find out you have celiac disease. Or, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, you can still be gluten sensitive and not have celiacs and still exhibit a lot of the same symptoms, but when they go and do a biopsy or they do antibody test, you won't show positive. So there's another side that you have to keep in mind too. If you're given the green light and still you're having symptoms, you might want to consider that you're gluten sensitive, not essentially being diagnosed with celiac. So what I want to do is find out, so I know where everybody is, and if you don't have to raise your hand if you don't want to. Is anyone in here actually been diagnosed with celiac? So I know where I'm directing. So okay, so about a quarter of the folks here. Does anyone here know someone who has celiac, and that's why you're here? Okay, so that's almost the other quarter. Anyone here suspect that they might have it themselves or some kind of gluten sensitivity? Okay. Well, this will work out well because I think we'll be able to handle everyone's questions and concerns about anything related to someone you know yourselves or just general gluten sensitivity. I handed everyone a very basic handout, and I was telling Razi, after I was going through it, I noticed that when I wrote this several years ago, there's been some new information and some new changes. So when we get to that part, I'll tell you some of the things you need to cross out because it's not actually accurate anymore. Now, in this kind of talk, I'd like to do more, if we can, some Q&A so I get a better feel what you would want to know. So to start out with, does anyone have a very specific question that you said, this is the reason I came here, and if no one answers it, then I didn't get what I came here for? Does anyone have something very...
If this is your irrelevant, you can tell me.
It's irrelevant. No.
But I've been getting information specifically about lentils and legumes. In one column, it says they're very, very good for you, it's a great idea, and another column says they're very, very bad for you, it's a terrible idea.
Okay.
And I think it has to do with lignans. I don't even know what those are, if I'm saying that right.
Yeah.
But that was just one thing. I wondered if that might come up tonight, and it feels a little tangential.
No, that's actually quite, and you, obviously, Razi, feel free to jump in if you think that I'm missing something, because obviously you have a lot of wealth of information. But that is not, that's actually very pertinent. And I'm going to keep that down here and see what other kind of questions and try to maybe answer them all at the same time. Anyone else have something very specific, whether it's related to themselves?
Well, this is a bit more central to gluten because even Razi said some oats are gluten-free and some aren't. I'm really not clear
It's all
on,
about processing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, some
where
people who
might
are
be or how to be safe.
Some people who are gluten intolerant can't handle oats as well. But if they are labeled gluten-free, for example, Bob's Red Mill Company labeled them gluten-free. My daughter does handle them and we bake with oats a lot and make oatmeal. But some people can't, so it's very...
Like I can't eat oats at all, and I've been gluten-free for
And-
19 years.
yeah.
So I was diagnosed way before it was cool to be diagnosed.
Is it cool now?
And
Cool now.
so that's very important. You both bring up a good point, is that with celiac, there's such a variety of who or what people are sensitive to that sometimes it becomes confusing because someone will say, well, I did this diet, or this is what you should eat, or this is what you should not eat, and then you become confused for yourself because you thought that, for example, legumes might be perfect, but then you're hearing not. And you, as you heard from Razi, sometimes oats are good. Someone can have oats, sometimes they can't. Sometimes someone has to be completely free, other times someone can have some grains and be okay, because celiac disease and gluten sensitivity ranges tremendously from one end of the spectrum to the other. So one of the first things that I do with clients, and depending on which direction I go, anyone feel free to bring me back in the direction you want me to go in. You feel free to tell me, hey, you need to go somewhere else, because sometimes I get off on a tangent, I might stay there for a while. Did you someone have a question back there? No? Okay.
Okay, so if you've been off gluten for a while because you suspect that you're gluten intolerant,
Right.
and then you take a celiac test, would that give you a false negative?
Yeah, so that's the answer to your question, yeah. Sometimes a doctor will say, if you suspect you're gluten sensitive or have celiac, that you have to go back on gluten and get your body all agitated, and then they'll do the test again.
You have to be on it like 3 months usually
Yeah.
before they'll even do it. It's a very
Now-
long time, and it's the highest false negative rate anyway. So even if you went back on it, the likelihood of still having a false negative is super high.
So I have a client, it's interesting today, she thought she was gluten sensitive or had celiacs, and she went gluten-free, and then she went to her doctor and said, I'm not sure. He said, well, you have to do a biopsy. She told him that she hadn't been eating gluten for a couple of years, and she was not willing to put herself through the agony of being on gluten. So what they did was they did a genetic test, and they were able to determine that she had celiac through a very specific genetic test, which is quite accurate. I mean, everything here is going to have a range of percentage of being off, not being accurate, but that's another way to do it instead of subjecting yourself to gluten again. So if anyone you know or yourself, you go and they say you should be doing a biopsy, you can say, well, what about the genetic test option? Or you can also test for antibodies, because even if you haven't been having gluten for a while, you're still going to have the antibodies in your body. They don't just magically go away. And that's why if you were to start eating gluten again, those antibodies are still there, and they say, aha, I've been waiting for you for 2 years. Okay, I'm going to go attack the enzymes that deal with breaking down gluten, and you're going to start feeling those symptoms again.
And do those two things, the genetic test as well as the antibody test, apply to both celiac disease and gluten sensitivity?
Well, that's the trick, is if you're gluten sensitive, you're most likely not going to have antibodies. That's really a difference between an autoimmune type of reaction from celiacs and not having celiacs. It's not an autoimmune, so the antibodies But you can still exhibit the same symptoms, and that's where some things can be confusing, where you have no antibodies, your genetic testing says you're not predisposed, and you go, okay, well, now what do I do? Because they say I don't have anything related to celiac, but you know that something's off. So generally, when my suggestion is for clients, if they come in, whether they've been diagnosed with celiac or not, is let's just go ahead and take all the grains out. Just clear the plate. Let your body rest. Because what I have found clinically is that if someone is sensitive to gluten and gluten-containing grains, is that the body starts to dislike even non-gluten grains. And getting those out as well could be very helpful in speeding up the healing process. Or I don't know if anyone's heard the term refractory celiac, meaning celiac that won't respond to anything. Well, those people are probably still eating foods that are considered gluten-free, like rice or corn, and not have cleaned their diet up with sugar, and so they're not giving their body the best chance to heal. So what I do is to get all the refined grains out and see how they do. If they start to improve, then I say, okay, great, let's keep the grains out. And I tell my clients, we've got to do 30, 60, 90 days. We've got to keep going. This isn't like a 2-week project. And then if their symptoms subside, and then I say, well, let's see what you do with millet. Let's see how you do with quinoa. Let's see how you do with buckwheat, which it has the word wheat, but it's not a wheat. And we just go step by step. Let's see how you do with basmati rice. Do one thing at a time. And then we might get to a point where we added in corn, and all of a sudden the symptoms start to come back. And you go, well, corn doesn't have gluten, but there's something about corn that the body's identifying that's similar, might be similar to the gluten, and so you just keep the corn out and say, okay, that's my gluten-free product that I can't go near. Which is one of the things I found out recently is that, preparing for today, is that they're finding that corn can cause the exact same symptoms as gluten. So you have to be very careful with that. Now, it's not for everybody. They found that it was only a certain percent, a relatively small percent, but it's still a problem.
28% or something was the new research.
I didn't know.
Right on.
Has anyone heard that before with gluten?
It's really high.
Yeah, so it might be higher than what I saw, but that's something to consider when you're trying to clean your diet out is corn. And the problem with corn is it's prevalent in everything.
It's gluten-free.
But the nice thing about it is mostly prevalent in processed foods. So if you start eating more of a whole foods diet, you can automatically eliminate the corn. Whether it's, the difference here is it processed corn that's the real problem, or can you have corn on the cob? Well, if you're doing really well, you might be able to have corn on the cob, but not the highly processed corn, because they do tend to put other things in with those processed foods that could elicit a response. So you would only know by how you're feeling, but I generally say let's get all these out, and let's say we had corn back in, there's a problem, we keep that out, and probably permanently, and treat it as a gluten food. Now, going back to the legumes that you mentioned, like Razi said, it depends on the person. Most people, and it could be secondary to the gluten aspect, but when you have celiac disease, you have, is everyone familiar? I've heard that you have all these little villi in your intestines, and it should be like, I call it a 70s shag carpet. It should look really thick with all these. What celiac does is essentially begins to whittle those away, and they get shorter and shorter, and they disappear, and you might have patches that are good, but a lot of patches that aren't good. When those start to wear away, then you essentially get a lot of inflammation in the intestines, particularly the small intestines. And what happens is then you can become super sensitive to other things. So you may have been able to eat legumes and beans earlier and lentils, but now that you've become super sensitive, those foods that are harder to digest could then present a problem which they wouldn't have earlier. So inherently they're not bad. I guess that's the short answer. But you have, go ahead.
The thing with celiac is, as well as processing, it's kind of the same thing as the oats. Like, some beans and nuts and lentils are processed in shared facilities, so then they get contaminated.
Yeah.
So you have to be really careful kind of with the oats as well. Like, you have to be careful, like, that you're eating a brand that's not contaminated by a shared facility.
So that's something to look at, see prepared in a facility, and if you have celiac disease, you probably just, okay, it's gluten-free, but it was prepared in a facility, then you probably should just strike it off the list, particularly if you're having difficulty recovering. Are they mixing and matching their knives? Cross-examine like the managers on the witness stand, and ask them, how do they do this? How do they do that? If you're not sure, I mean, don't. And if you're unsure, then you can call up to a higher level for that restaurant and see how they prepare foods. You can sit there and watch them, or you could just, if you're not sure, just not eat at the restaurant. A lot of times they won't give a lot. They won't be careful with sauces. They might have sauces that are next to each other, and those things can get mixed up. You have soups and gravy. Even little specks of those things can, gravy can go from one side to the other, and they're not sure. So they have to be very specific in terms of preparation. Here at CoreLife, I'll put a little plug in. You don't have to worry about that. Just, as you said, stay away from the bread.
It's like the random bread at the end.
But we do have that in a container, and it doesn't get cross-contaminated. Everything's staying in there, and everything's secure.
Anything you pick things up, tongs, stuff like that. Does anyone have any questions about that? Has anyone run into a problem with cross-contamination and has information they might want to share from a personal experience?
I will just say, I'm sorry, if anyone's new to this, so we don't have a completely gluten-free house. We chose to have, we do have mixed. There are some utensils and dishes that we have separately. Obviously a toaster oven can't be shared for regular bread and gluten-free bread. Those are, obvious things once you get into this whole story. A colander, those also, you don't want gluten getting stuck in there. We do have a gluten-free colander with a different shape. It's a flowered shape, and the other, stainless steel one, which is for gluten pasta, if I make that for the other children. I don't always make gluten-free pasta for everybody. Sometimes we do have separate food, but everybody knows, the drill. Wooden spoons is also something that's recommended to have separately. So I have one, big wooden spoon holder, which says on it gluten-free. Everybody knows it's gluten-free, and a separate drawer. So you separate them. It's just, but it doesn't mean you have to have a separate set of dishes. If things go through the dishwasher, they are cleaned well enough, in my opinion. this is the information that I'm collecting and for sure seeing it's okay. So there are some things that need to be separated, but for sure not everything. You don't have to, not the whole family has to switch over to gluten-free if that doesn't have to happen.
Okay, you don't have to have
We're the
a...
opposite. My whole house is gluten-free, and we have a separate, we have like a little wooden thing in our kitchen that has like a really cheap toaster for regular bread, which is only kept frozen. We have paper plates and, also my daughter's 4, so it's also,
How
what I
many
mean?
members of the family
So,
are gluten-free?
2 and 2. We're 2 and 2, we're half. They're the same. So we keep everything really specific. My gluten is never cooked in my house unless it's bread. There's no pasta, no, nothing. There's
So-
no grain cooked in my house. There is
the
no.
safest.
Yeah, so it seems-
We err on the side of caution, but also like you said, if you're going to go out to a restaurant, there are restaurants in the area that are good about it, and there are ones that aren't. Like Good Belly Deli, not to say anything about CoreLife because we come here a lot, but is a restaurant that you can go and get a grilled cheese on gluten-free bread, and they have a separate panini maker that they only do gluten-free bread on, and they'll show you they're really good about it. They'll show they'll let you look, and they're really really good about it. And having a 4-year-old that likes grilled cheese, it's nice to be able to take that once in a blue moon.
So let me see, I got a couple of hands back there. So
how far is the celiac, is it an allergy or an intolerance?
the question is, celiac is an allergy or an intolerance?
Either or?
No, it's
Can I ask
neither.
this because,
Right.
if they touch crumbs, if people with celiac touch crumbs, can that be an issue sometimes for certain degrees of it, or is that?
Well, the good, or the short answer, and then we can elaborate, and anyone else feel free to jump in. Celiac is actually an autoimmune disease, so that's beyond an allergy, that's beyond, what was the other, intolerance. Now, celiac has to be the protein. So as everyone know, I actually should have backed up that with celiac, the problem is the body's reaction, the antibody reaction to the actual gluten protein that's being ingested. And so for someone to have a reaction to the gluten, you have to have the antibody actually act on it. So if it's just sitting there and you touch it, it's not going. The antibodies aren't going to. You're not absorbing anything, and so it's not like a kryptonite type of effect.
There is proof that
Yeah.
people with celiacs should not play with Play-Doh and things like that are made of wheat. That by putting it on your skin
Well, if
can get in your system.
well, if you're gonna-
it will affect your body.
So what I was
proof that you shouldn't touch. You should there are cosmetics and shampoos and lotions that have wheat in it that somebody with a true autoimmune disease should not be using in any shape or
Well,
form.
let me back up. So what I was referring to is, you asked about a crumb.
Just saying.
So,
Sorry.
so you don't want to the food is not an issue, if you touch it. But things that are actually absorbed, as she mentioned, into the skin, now that's a whole separate thing. So what I wanted to first point out is that food, just by touching it, isn't going to have that effect. But I was actually getting to that. But but that was a good point.
My daughter.
But if it's actually absorbed into the skin, then it gets into the bloodstream, and then you have the antibody reaction. So skincare, which is a very good point, you have to be very careful what you put on your body. Now that's helps bring that in.
Again, that's a sometimes.
Yeah.
Some people are sensitive if you have the dermatitis, some people aren't.
Aren't.
We are not careful about that, for example.
And that's a good, and as you're finding here, there's different ranges, so sometimes people will be sensitive to that, and other times you won't. But
But the
as-
research proves that even if you're not sensitive, you shouldn't risk it because it can be affecting you silently that you don't know about.
I do,
Technically, research proves that.
Yeah.
I wasn't diagnosed until I was 20 and I needed a bowel resection and nobody knew I had the damage that I had.
so let me get the question back there, so I,
Okay,
Or maybe for the extreme, but-
little girl who has autism, and she can't advocate for herself.
Uh-huh.
Gluten sensitive, so fortunately we're together. And I go through the lunch line with her. She gets gluten-free lunch. And I'm questioning a lot of times things about their gluten-free lunch, but they act like, how dare you question what we're doing? But one time, she was supposed to get a hamburger, just not on a bun.
right?
And that was the gluten-free lunch. And she said, oh, she can't have that bun. The other one says, okay, and she takes the bun off and hands me that.
Yeah.
No, and she got so mad at me. But it's like, absolutely not. Now, I don't know what else you've done, but I saw that one. Put that back and give her a hamburger that has not touched a bun. But yeah, if you have anything to say about lunches, yeah.
Okay.
Technically, she should have a 504, and she should have a 504 and have a very specific lunch plan. And if you're her her 504, anything against the 504 is technically considered child abuse. Like if she has celiac disease, which is covered under the Disability Act, anything that's against the 504 can actually be a child abuse charge against the school. And we've actually dealt with that in school district that we're in as well, to an extreme level. And she should have a very specific, personally, I send my kids with all of their food. I do not allow them to eat anything at the school at all. So as a parent with a kid with a celiac issue, I wouldn't allow that, but that's me.
Let me get
So, this specifically, I have a celiac daughter who has autism.
We both have,
But she's verbal. We have a really awesome nurse. So we have a nurse that can get behind the celiac diagnosis. So, because people were questioning me, and she's like, no, this mom knows what she's doing. And that, if it becomes a problem, so my daughter's 9, and she has learned to question adults. Something that's really hard at 9 years old, but you obviously can't. The lady did that to me, and I said, no, she needs to see how you do it. We need my daughter, and obviously it would have to be you because it's a different circumstances. They should be able to show you the entire process of how they do it. That's just the way it is. I draw a very hard line, but I have the nurse behind me, so I definitely recommend talking to the nurse, and if they don't have background in celiac, definitely
how am I doing for time?
And the crumb thing,
15 minutes?
wash your hands before it gets into your mouth.
So we have about 15 minutes. I want to touch on a few things. One is, as was mentioned here, is if you have a child and has celiac disease or gluten sensitivity, it could fall onto you or several parents that you know and go as a group, and you might have to educate the nurse, the vice principal, the principal, because you're not going to get anywhere with the person on the line. You got to go up. And one of the things that happens is how many people here have been told or had someone say that they were told that that's just a fad, gluten sensitivity. There's no such thing. My doctor said that doesn't exist.
The school knew everything and gave my daughter a granola bar with gluten, and it almost to test me. And she threw up on the teacher, which kind of made me happy.
So one reason I say that is there is so much evidence in the medical journals that this is a real thing. One of the easiest, so you don't want to overwhelm them either when you're trying to educate them, because then they'll just tune you out, is something very basic. It's very with a lot of credibility behind it. I went just to the Mayo Clinic website, and they had a very good write-out of everything that we're talking about today. So you could bring something with some high official recognition that's not going to go into all the scientific terms if you're getting pushback. And you can go to the Johns Hopkins website, so you can get these places with credibility. And they actually do. I was surprised. I thought maybe they might poo-poo. They actually are very serious about celiac disease on these websites. And you can do a good education job with those types, with the people who you need to talk to. If you run into more of a roadblock, then, like you mentioned, you can actually have that form that you talked about that will actually force them to do something that will go along with what you want. You could invite them to the next meeting of now I've drawn a blank. R.O.C.K. And say, hey, you could buy one of these books, take them to one of the websites. Give them the website information. Sometimes the pushback is they just don't know, and they've been told something by someone, and that's what sticked. And now they think that you're just making something up. There's another good website. You may have mentioned it. It's just very basic. It's just called celiac.com. Has a lot of good information that you could print things off of, and the same thing with the other websites. And then you have a little bit of an arsenal when you walk in there and say, okay, and this could be for anything. Maybe your doctor doesn't take you seriously. Maybe family members think that you're just trying to make something up for attention. And this happens a lot with autoimmune issues, that it's in your head, you want attention, it really doesn't exist, things like that. So if you have this with you, people will actually say, oh, really, that granola bar, I didn't realize, and they might not realize the severity. That's part of the other problem, is people might think they're doing a good job, but in their brain they just don't get how severe someone can react if they have gluten. So if you,
It's not a peanut allergy. Like, you're not going to go into anaphylaxis, so people like...
yeah, so they think you're not going to collapse and die, so how bad can it be? But what's nice here is they go through all the symptoms that someone can experience when they have gluten, and not just the short term, but there are some very severe long-term symptoms if it's not addressed properly.
So I'm an example perfect of that. I'm going to be 40 years old, undiagnosed celiac the third too. I've had a liver transplant, bowel reconstruction, all because I was diagnosed undiagnosed celiac and my body reacted. So fortunately at 20 months, I was diagnosed when my daughter was at 20 months. She's now 9. So just because I wasn't getting the absorption and all that stuff, and I was not reactive. I had no, besides besides the symptoms. So my daughter was constantly vomiting. So that's how she was starting to fly and everything. So that just shows you how they're varying in symptoms.
I'm sorry, Dina had a question. I know we're running out of time.
I just have a question about a person who is tolerant versus a person who is not.
Uh-huh.
A person that is not, should they not have gluten in their diet ever?
Who's not tolerant?
Who's not tolerant? I mean,
You mean
if they don't,
who's not-
they're
who-
diagnosed with
Oh.
it, is it, I mean, I don't have the issue.
Right.
Is it okay for me to go completely 100% gluten-free?
Well, sometimes you hear it's not good to go, has anyone heard it's not good to go gluten-free if you don't need to? Well, essentially, if the gluten, there's no health benefit to having gluten. So if you take it out, it doesn't matter, and they'll say, well, you got to have. How many people say you got to have the grains? Don't cut all the grains. So you can survive perfectly well with no grains, because where do you get all your minerals and vitamins and your carbohydrates? Well, the vegetable. You get everything you want from your vegetable. And if you have celiacs or digestive issues, you would, part of the preparation, you can slow cook in a slow cooker and pre-digest those vegetables so that when you eat it, most of the work's already been done. Same thing with the meat, so soups and stews are very good. So if you're don't have celiacs or you don't have a gluten sensitivity, you can still just, without any repercussion to your health, and you might actually find some tremendous benefits when the grains come out, because you're mostly going to be cutting out, for most people, the highly processed grains. So you'll get a side benefit to that. And you could just eat the good ones, like the quinoa, the millet, things like that, particularly if you have no other issues. One thing I thought, go ahead.
Just a quick question, hopefully you can answer this quick. So I have read, and everybody else has seen, that the reason why people are having issues now with wheat is because they've genetically altered, wheat, I don't know how many years ago or whatever, but is that any validity to that?
There is. I mean, wheat has changed over the years, and it's higher gluten content. So sometimes they'll say go back to the old ancient grains. Well, if you're gluten sensitive or have gluten sensitivity, it doesn't really matter, because you've already passed that point. So yes, it is true. And not only that, and this actually, I'll try to hit 2 points in maybe 8 minutes I got. Is that, good internal clock, is that one thing is, when you're talking about gluten and gluten sensitivity, is that, as you mentioned, gluten sensitivity to celiacs can show up at any time in your life. And it can be triggered by life-altering events, like stress and illness. You might have been perfectly fine, and then at some point in your life you go, what in the world happened? So it can happen at any point in a person's life, but what's happening too is that people are eating such poor diets that they're having highly inflammable sugar, lots of sugar all the time, lots of soy, which is horrific for the digestive system. And so if you have the predisposition in the genetic makeup to have celiac disease, you can flip those genes on, and now you've got it. But if you eat really well, and this is something you may have heard, is you can turn on and off dangerous genes in your body depending on your diet. So if you're eating a really good diet, you could have prevented yourself from having celiacs. But if you were eating a poor diet, which most people do, with processed grains, sugars, additives, preservatives, you could flip this gene on, and then you're not turning it off. Now you have to manage it from that point forward. So people's diet are so bad that they're actually causing situations that can increase the probability of having celiacs. And then once they are diagnosed, they don't get other foods out, like sugar. I mean, I would get sugar out of anybody who has any autoimmune disease automatically, because that increases inflammation. Autoimmune is all about inflammation and the degradation of your tissue. So what's happening is those little antibodies are actually beginning to eat away at the lining of your small intestine, and that's why you have can have so many health issues. One thing I wanted to mention too is for anyone who has kids or infants, anyone who can't speak for themselves, babies, celiac or gluten sensitivity or just grain sensitivity can be caught early. So one of the things I wanted to make sure is that if you have a baby that has digestive issues, and you see this more and more frequently, who has, and you're nodding your head, so you have a colicky baby, a very gassy baby, a lot of bloating, constipation, a baby that won't stop crying but doesn't have any other types of issues and is constantly crying. These are good indicators that there's something wrong with the digestive system. And then you can see, okay, well, what is the mother eating if she's breastfeeding? Well, gluten is going to come through the breast milk. You have to clean up your diet. You have to be sure what that baby is eating. If you're in the bottle, you got to make sure you're checking the formula. But whatever you do, don't go and get a soy-based formula, for my opinion, because you're going to wreak havoc with the digestive system. So something to keep an eye on. And if you're not sure what to do with the baby nutritionally and you're kind of stumped, that's when you need to start advocating and going to a doctor, going to someone in nutrition like myself or someone else that's close to you that may know a thing or two about handling the situation. Because if you can fix the baby's digestive system early, you'll save him or her from a lifelong history of digestive issues. And this can go for, not just baby, but 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds that have a lot of these issues, particularly constipation or constipation/diarrhea. That's another good indicator that something's going on. Another quick thing is that, and the client, it just happened, she was in this morning, you might not exhibit digestive issues when it comes to gluten sensitivity or being celiac. You might actually exhibit neurological issues first. So you might exhibit anything to do with the nervous system, because the nervous system is actually becoming agitated by the gluten antibodies. And one of the things is how the brain functions. So even a mental disorder, a mental issue, something even akin to schizophrenia, can be attributed to gluten. Where you're looking at someone who's highly nervous or agitated, someone who has trouble concentrating and thinking, brain fog all the time. These are things that can be exhibited through gluten sensitivity or celiac, but the person could have no digestive issues or seemingly no digestive issues. So another way to see how, if someone has those symptoms, is say, well, let's take the gluten out of your diet and the sugar and see how you do. And if you get a positive response, well, there was something going on with that diet and now you've found the problem. Has anyone heard about that before, where there could be a couple people, non-digestive issues that show up even though the person presents normally?
Skin and brain are the most common.
I'm wondering if you have any really robust scientific websites with references for non-celiac sensitivity.
That's a good.
There's a lot of literature out there that is saying it's bogus and it's problematic.
Well,
I know that's not true, but I'm not finding good research.
So I almost forgot to mention this. I'm so glad you said this. So you don't have to know a whole lot in terms of what you need to look for to search. But what I do is I type in non-gluten sensitivity peer review, or peer review journal, peer review paper. And so I brought this in case anyone wanted to look after the talk. These are all the things I printed out last night from that. And they're all in peer-reviewed journals, and they deal with, And I think I have one right here. Let me see. This is celiac. See if I can quickly find it. Oh, here we go. This is in the Journal of Biomedical, the Biomedical Journal, published in 2015. Celiac disease and non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And there's oils of these kinds of, and so you can have this and print this out. And what's nice is you don't have to worry about reading the 15-page. You go just to the abstract and the conclusion, and you'll get 90% of what you need and just highlight that. And then the rest is bonus material if you want to take the time to read through that. And you'll actually become more knowledgeable by going to things like this, reading those kinds of things that I mentioned, going to those websites, than probably and it's sad to say this, and most medical doctors or anyone in the medical field, because you really have to become your own expert for your body, because as you noticed here, the range is so different, and one person will do this and one person will do that, but you have to become the expert and know what the other options are, because if you're not improving, you might have said, well, I didn't think that the skincare products would be a big deal, but I've been doing all this diet stuff, maybe I should look at the skincare product.
Too is a lot of people don't realize that celiac actually takes, there's proof that it takes 10 years to actually heal your system after you go gluten-free. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to go gluten-free and 3 months later all's going to be well with the world.
No, it's definitely not an overnight thing. So how are we doing with time, just say? Okay, so I have 2 minutes. I got one question back there. And then
Is there any dairy correlation?
dairy?
Yes.
So the short answer is yes. And what I've found is pasteurized dairy does not work so well with anyone who has an autoimmune issue, whether it's RA, Hashimoto's, any kind of digestive issue, so that would include celiac. I have found most people do better if you can get raw cheese and raw dairy, because it's not been pasteurized and you can actually digest it better. But initially, I do recommend that my clients start getting all the dairy out, so we eliminate that as another option that can be a problem. Do you have anything about dairy? A lot of bone broth here, by the way. The other thing is bone density. So celiac is very much tied to osteoporosis. So particularly for women, if you suspect or you know you have it, and your daughter, you want to make sure that that is handled long-term consistently, because it can and does lead to osteoporosis if it's not handled properly. The other is infertility. It's vital that a mother who has any sensitivity to gluten or has celiac disease take it seriously, because it can induce miscarriages and actually cause infertility. So that's why when someone poo-poos this, I get very upset, as most of you do here, because this list of things is not to be taken lightly. It's also tied in with cancer. Certain forms of cancer. And I mentioned earlier is that the development of neurological issues. And so that's another prime way that people can have celiacs and display it and not actually have digestive issues. They have a lot of neurological disorders, or one neurological disorder. So there's a whole list of long-term effects, and why the consistency of healing the gut is so important in the diet.
Something you can do, something else you can do to have your body absorb the nutrients better?
Well, one of the main things is predigested foods. That's the soups, the stews, the bone broths, because it takes very little effort, and your body says, "Ooh, look at this!" It can absorb through where the areas, even where there's no villi anymore. There's no work has to be done, because the digestion actually takes place in between the villi. So if they're gone, you're not digesting. But if it's already digested, you can do it. And the other is digestive enzymes. You can do, but your good digestive enzymes to give your body some kind of. But when you get the supplements, make sure they don't have gluten in them, because most do. And a big one is wheat germ. So wheat germ has gluten. That is gluten. So verify your supplements. And someone brought up a good point as the last thing is always check your labels on any supplement that you get. And also, and it should be 100% gluten-free, and you call them if you can't get a verification. The other is don't peak. I wrote it down here because I've fallen into this trap, and so have my clients, is don't be complacent with things that you've known will work for you. I think you mentioned it. Always read the labels. Labels are changing. They might decide too much effort. They might put in another ingredient that is now a problem to you. So continually check your labels, even if you've known that this thing's been good for you for 3 years. Spot check things.
You can't trust labels, because even in a gluten-free group that I'm in, somebody posted a picture of a meal that they got on a plane. They were going to Australia, so it was like a meal that was provided, and it said gluten-free right on the top. And the bottom, if you looked, it says contains wheat. And I was like, I looked at the picture, I'm like, that in itself is an oxymoron.
Certified.
And you have,
Like, it shouldn't.
and that app, right?
Gluten-free right at the bottom, gluten-free on top, contains wheat at the bottom. I'm like,
And you have that app that you can scan bars. So that's another way. It's IPIAT.
Yeah, it's there's a lot.
Okay. So what I better do right now, because I see Dina's got the microphone, is I'm going to go ahead and end here. As you can tell, I think I only got to, this is my chicken scratch on this paper, I got to about 1/3 of everything that I wrote down, probably even less, and I thought there's probably a lot of information you wanted to get out too. I think we got a good part of it out, but you can tell there's a lot of information, so I'm sure we'll probably be doing more of these talks, right? And so you can contact me for questions. You can contact, you have given your email?
Yeah, you should all take a flyer and definitely join the group, and my email's there. And you should.
And last but not least, a little plug for myself. I have, if anyone would like to sign up for my newsletter, you can do that. And I also have a bunch, I'll put them right next to Razi's flyers, handouts for my upcoming talks and events and things like that. So if you know of anyone who is not doing well, it's a good opportunity to introduce them to a way so they don't have to deal with the same issues this time last year. So with this, I'm going to get out of the way and hand it over. And I also want to thank Razi very much for inviting me. This has been a great talk, a lot of discussion.
Yes.
That's why I was afraid of doing a
No,
handout.
it's okay. It's okay.
So on the positive note of a very, very, very heavy topic tonight, please enjoy your meal here.
Wonderful meal.
Be safe, be free, and we appreciate you guys. And I would highly recommend that you actually sign up and go to the Facebook page for R.O.C.K, because I think it's a good information page, and of course to see Erin. Thank you and have a safe night.